Rhinos, hippos, elephants, Dwayne Johnson. There's no disputing that mammals can grow quite large indeed. Compared to the biggest dinosaurs though, the biggest living land mammals are distinctly lacking in heft. So, what's the deal? Why are there no house-sized apes dragging Hollywood starlets to the top of the Empire State Building? But could there be? Let's have a look at the science of colossal creatures.
I'm Stu, this is Debunked, and we're here to sort the truths from the myths and the facts from the misconceptions.
For animals to increase in size over the course of successive generations, we need two things: an environment that permits animals to grow large, and natural selection in favour of larger individuals. There are lots of reasons why natural selection might favour size increases, such as attracting a mate, catching prey, or avoiding being eaten. Being big might also mean being able to access precious food resources that your rivals can't. By being tall enough to reach the leaves at the top of a tree, for example, or being able to brutally fend off the competition, these benefits lead to survival advantage, increasing the chances of passing on genes that likely result in larger than average offspring.
Either way, the idea that natural selection is able to drive an increase in size over generations is widely accepted. But why were there so many more giants in the past? And how were they able to grow so big?
The titanosaur, the biggest dinosaur ever discovered, grew up to 37 meters, or 122 feet in length, from head to tail. Was there something about the environmental conditions in the dinosaur era that enabled gigantism? One theory that's bouncing around the web is that gravity was weaker millions of years ago, enabling huge dinosaurs to be more nimble, in spite of their massive size.
Bear with me.
Gravity does limit the maximum size of plants and animals, but there's no reason to believe the mass of the Earth has changed substantially since the time of the dinosaurs, so its gravitational pull should be the same. An altogether more scientific theory speculates that the growth of ancient giants might have been supercharged by an overabundance of oxygen. Oxygen currently makes up about 21% of the air in our atmosphere. But it's thought that 300 million years ago, it accounted for as much as 35%. So, did any animals grow larger as a result? Well, bugs certainly did. Giant creepy crawlies lived for millions of years before the first monster movie. However, if we look at historical oxygen levels and the presence of giant animals throughout geological time, there doesn't seem to be an overall correlation between the two. High CO2 availability is also thought to have led to a boom in plant productivity, resulting in a bottomless buffet for herbivores. Again, though, these conditions don't have a strong correlation with the presence of gigantic dinosaurs, so they can't have been the deciding factor. We also know that CO2 levels are a primary factor governing global temperature via the greenhouse effect. And we've all seen that there is a lack of correlation between CO2 levels and gigantism. This implies a lack of correlation between warm temperatures and gigantism too.
It seems then that while factors like oxygen concentration, temperature, and plant productivity might have helped along the way, they're not enough to explain alone or together the emergence of huge dinosaurs. So, how did it happen?
The current opinion is that it wasn't only the resources or conditions available to them, but the way they adapted to these conditions that made the difference. Our enormous friends the titanosaurs help to illustrate this point. Let's have a look at some of its adaptations, as outlined in a 2011 paper in the journal Biological Reviews.
A ludicrously long neck.
This helped in two ways, enabling it to reach otherwise inaccessible food sources, much like a giraffe, and enabling it to devour its surroundings without having to move the rest of its body too much.
Light, airy bones and air sac breathing.
In addition to their relatively small heads, which were light enough that a long, thin neck could support them, several of the vertebrae at the core of the titanosaur's long neck were riddled with air-filled cavities, making the vertebral column lighter and easier to support. They may also have had a bird-style air sac respiratory system, which allows fresh air to pass over the gas-exchanging parts of the lungs during both exhalation and inhalation, resulting in greater respiratory efficiency and lowering the energetic cost of breathing.
Egg laying.
Titanosaurs laid eggs, while mammals bear live young. A study in the early 1990s found that, in mammals, increases in body size led to a decrease in the number of offspring, while for birds, the number of offspring remained fairly consistent as body size increased. If this were true for dinosaurs, it would have meant that even a very big dinosaur would have been able to produce a large number of offspring, resulting in the ability to recover more quickly from population crashes. Laying eggs also avoids a problem seen in large mammals. Increasing gestation time shows a tendency to increase with size. It takes over a year for a giraffe or a rhino to take a calf to full term, and for an elephant, the gestation time is close to 2 years. For an animal the size of Titanosaur, live gestation would have been unviably slow. As well adapted as they were though, about 66 million years ago, a catastrophic event, probably an asteroid impact, wiped out the dinosaurs. A nuclear winter followed. Not enough sunlight means not enough plants, and not enough plants means no more big herbivores. And a lack of prey means no more big predators. Ultimately, the giants of the dinosaur era were doomed. Once the dinosaurs' reign of terror was over, the mammals were free to thrive, and thrive they did. Over the first 25 million years of this period, maximum terrestrial mammal body size increased by several orders of magnitude.
So, how big are we talking?
Behold, the Paraceratherium, a giant hornless rhino with a giant, difficult to pronounce name. Living in Eurasia in the early to late Oligocene, 34 to 23 million years ago, Paraceratherium has been estimated to have stood as tall as 4.8 meters, or 15 foot 9 inches at the shoulder, and weighed a spectacular 15 to 20 metric tons. That's 33,000 to 44,000 pounds. Intriguingly, after this 25 million year period of increasing maximum mammal size, the upper limit appears to have been reached.
So why did they stop getting bigger?
A 2010 study suggested that 2 key factors constrained the size of giant mammals: temperature and land area. Firstly, we need to understand that as an organism gets larger, the increases in its overall volume outpace the increases in its surface area, resulting in a decrease in its surface area to volume ratio. This is a result of basic geometry and is best illustrated using a cube. As it expands, its volume increases to the power of 3, while its surface area only grows to the power of 2. To understand this further, along with other geometry concepts, you can click on the link in the description and visit our partner Brilliant, where you can play with these concepts to understand them effectively. This all means that a big, bulky body results in a low surface area to volume ratio, and this is advantageous for retaining heat in cold habitats, mammoth style. This body type might not fare so well in the heat though. It's entirely possible that Paraceratherium was as big as a terrestrial mammal can get before it has trouble regulating its own body temperature. Any bigger and overheating might become an existential threat. Perhaps the mighty Paraceratherium reached a point where its ever-changing environment was no longer a suitable match for its sizable body. They are, after all, extinct. As for land area, a very large animal needs a lot of resources, and a lot of resources generally means a big home range. Changes to the environment in terms of climate, or in terms of the degree of competition from other species, can result in an animal like Paraceratherium coming up short in terms of the resources it needs to survive. As we discussed earlier, the larger mammals get, the fewer offspring they tend to produce, meaning that the population as a whole is more vulnerable to changes to its habitat, including climate change. Some combination of these factors probably led to Paraceratherium going the way of the non-avian dinosaurs: extinction. Intriguingly though, research on a small fossilised bone fragment suggests that there may have been an even bigger mammal. Paleoloxodon, an ancient elephant, who it's been estimated may have been 40 centimetres, over a foot, taller and weighed around 5 metric tons or 11,000 pounds more than our Paraceratherium. Either way though, Paleoloxodon too is long extinct.
The factors we've described so far relate to the interactions between animals and their environments. But there are also some more fundamental, mechanical reasons why animals tend not to have huge bodies.
To understand these factors, we worked with paleontologist and paleoartist Dr. Mark Whitten and physics professor Via Adamaki. You see, when you scale up any animal, it obviously gets heavier and needs bigger and stronger muscles to be able to move. To support this increase in body mass, a bigger and chunkier skeleton is needed. The problem is that the strength of any material, in terms of its ability to resist tensile, compressive or shear forces, does not scale with size increases in a linear fashion. As we demonstrated with our Paraceratherium, the overall size of an animal, its volume and mass, is a three-dimensional quality, while the cross-sectional area of the bones that make up its skeleton, a property that determines their strength, is two-dimensional. This means that when scaling up, there is a mismatch between the rate at which volume and mass increase. Where dimensions increase at a cubic rate, again relating to our cuboid, think length times width times height, and the rate at which skeletal strength increases, where dimensions increase at a square rate, think length times width, like the surfaces of our cube. In other words, when scaling up an animal, its bones can never increase in size fast enough to maintain the same strength relative to body size. Though such a process obviously wouldn't actually occur in nature, theory tells us that indefinitely increasing an animal's size would eventually lead to too much strain on their bones, and ultimately failure of the skeleton. Larger skeletons also affect locomotion, as, after all, bone is one of our densest, heaviest body tissues. Larger bones need larger muscles to move them, and as with other aspects of animal scaling, simply increasing muscle bulk does not lead to a one-to-one increase in strength. Muscle size, contraction speed, and power output actually scales at a slower rate to muscle mass, such that adding more and more muscle doesn't lead to proportionate strength increases. Thus, scaling an animal indefinitely eventually creates a body too heavy to move. There is, therefore, a cycle to animal scaling. A significant increase in body mass requires a larger, sturdier skeleton, which needs larger, stronger muscles to move it, which in turn needs a larger skeletal framework to support them. This means that in reality, animal bodies have a maximum size when the ratio between body mass and skeletal strength is maxed out. There is no universal upper size limit to animal bodies, however, as the upper size threshold depends on the specific body plan. A fast runner like a greyhound or cheetah could never be as large as a hippo or elephant, because they rely on having relatively strong, powerful muscles and springy legs and skeletons to propel them along. Conversely, large herbivores like sauropods and elephants don't need to move fast, and have skeletons adapted for stability and weight bearing over speed and relative power.
So, where does all this leave Kong? In all honesty, it most likely leaves him beyond the realms of possibility.
If we want Kong to be the running, jumping, climbing, dinosaur-slaying hero we know from films, he would need to be much smaller than an elephant.
A 5 to 6 meter tall primate is going to be far heavier than a living gorilla, and the stresses on its skeleton are going to be much greater. Contrary to what we see in movies, real-life Kongs would probably be incapable of running, jumping, climbing, or suplexing giant reptiles. just as our largest living animals, like elephants, are also incapable of such feats. This is not to say that giant animals are not powerful and capable of impressive physical feats, but the laws of gravity and motion do not permit them to leap and charge around like creatures a fraction of their size. Were a creature such as Kong to exist, he'd barely resemble the on-screen version. According to Witten,
If Kongs followed the scaling principles of real animals, their heads would be proportionally small, as they are in all giant herbivores. The primate capacity for gripping and manipulating objects with our hands and feet would probably go too, in favor of sturdy hands and feet to support their weight. And they would probably be mostly hairless, as giant mammals have far greater trouble with losing heat than keeping warm.
So, no building-sized apes have ever existed then. That doesn't rule out all our big on-screen apes though. Take a look at this guy.
While this fantastically enormous incarnation of King Louie is obviously another product of the imagination of Hollywood, there's evidence to suggest that this oversized ape is more firmly rooted in reality than you may first think. Named Gigantopithecus for obvious reasons, the largest recorded primate walked the Earth from about 2 million to 350,000 years ago. While it was more closely related to the orangutan, it would have appeared more gorilla or Kong-like. The first person to discover in situ remains of Gigantopithecus blackie, paleontologist Pai Wentong, estimated that it would have stood at a height of about 3.7 meters, around 12 feet, which would make it more than double the height of your average male silverback gorilla. However, that was back in 1956, and more recent studies have lowered estimates to around 3 meters, or 10 foot, and a weight in the range of 2 to 300 kilograms, or 440 to 660 pounds, making it about 1.5 times heavier and taller than an average male silverback. While 3 meters is often stated as the ape's height by even the most popular of scientific publications, our expert believes these lower estimations still constitute an exaggeration of the size of Gigantopithecus. The remains that have been discovered so far are pretty scant. We actually have thousands of Gigantopithecus fossils, but most of them are teeth, as well as 4 incomplete lower jaws, insufficient material to accurately gauge body size. The teeth and jaw scraps are large and must have belonged to something gorilla-sized or bigger, but Witten feels we can't put any numbers on it at the moment.
Rough estimates of 200 to 300 kilogram overlap with the size of especially big gorilla males. Record size in the wild, 267 kilograms or 589 pounds, so we might be talking about an animal fractionally bigger than a gorilla, but not much.
If we're willing to indulge in a little thought experiment though, is there some set of conditions under which Kong might be able to exist? Well, Professor Brian Cox reasons this.
On a planet such as Mars, given the same bone strength, animals could be more massive because Mars's gravitational pull is around 1/3 of the Earth's. This would permit, in principle, larger animals to roam the red planet.
Kong and his species would also need a vast space to roam, and a huge amount of lush vegetation to eat. It might help if it were fairly cool, so that overheating is off the cards. There would have to be sufficient competition that being big was advantageous, but not so much competition that extinction occurred. And, last but not least, we'd need some sort of mechanism by which huge volcanic eruptions, asteroid strikes, and other naturally occurring extinction events were prevented. Either way, he'd probably still look more like this than this. Back in the reality of the present day though, there is hope for at least one of history's mammalian giants. George Church, a geneticist at Harvard, has been working on a project that hopes to resurrect the woolly mammoth. If Hollywood has taught us anything, it's this. If science provides us with the opportunity to resurrect enormous prehistoric animals, we should absolutely do it. What could possibly go wrong? Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed learning about the science and math concepts that we applied to explore and solve this prodigious primate puzzle, then you can continue your educational enlightenment for free with the Brilliant platform, which allows you to play with these concepts, an approach that has been proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. With Brilliant, you can develop your problem-solving skills by learning how basic scientific principles and math equations can be applied to solve puzzles and complete games relating to the world around you. You can tailor your learning journey to your own skill level by taking a quick quiz when you sign up, and you'll be matched with content that fits your current skill level and interests. But before you know it, you'll be mastering concepts that you thought were unachievable before. So instead of doom scrolling through social media when you have 5 minutes spare, why not make use of that time and exercise your brain?
To try everything Brilliant has to offer, free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/debunked or click on my link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.